The Competition Commission South Africa says there are reasons to believe that online intermediation platforms that facilitate the buying of goods and services between businesses and customers may have colluded to hinder, distort or restrict competition. Now, this has led to the CCSA imposing corrective action on companies such as Apple, Takealot, UberEats, Property24, Private Property, and even some online car businesses. Now, the government entity is intending on regulating these businesses so as to allow fair advantage for smaller online businesses that have been dominated by big players in the space of online intermediation platforms in South Africa. To find out a bit more, Tshegofatso Radinku is a senior analyst at the Competition Commission. He joins us now to take this conversation further. Tshegofatso, thank you very, very much. It's good to have you here with us on Morning Live.
Good morning to the viewers of Morning Live, and thank you for having us.
So what are the motivating factors that have convinced the Commission that there is, in fact, foul play, and how prevalent is this practice with these platforms?
Thank you. I think the Commission, when it initiated the inquiry, it had, it initiated it, to look at whether there are any market features in the online intermediation space that, distort, restrict competition. And it also looked at issues of, in line with the purpose of the Act, issues of whether, there was an effective participation of small and medium enterprises and historically disadvantaged. So basically, the assessment or the inquiry in itself, it looked at whether, there are the practices that will distort competition in that manner, and I think, as noted by the Commission in the report, some of these things, or the findings of the Commission, it was not necessarily that the online platforms themselves, they intended to stifle competition, but it is as a result of the byproduct of their, business models, So I think the motivation initially was just to look at the whole industry, of this online intermediation space, and to identify whether there's an effective participation of small and medium businesses, and to look at whether there are factors, that will even hinder platform competition, even the competition between platforms themselves, or even whether there are factors that basically hinder, competition between business users that list on these platforms. So I think that was the main motivation behind.
So perhaps maybe you can give us a very simple, practical example of what you're actually referring to and the kind of goods, because, I see some of the companies that have pretty much so been listed. These are huge companies and companies that we use, many of us, on a daily basis. Whether we're talking Apple, we're talking Booking.com, we're talking Takealot, some of the car manufacturers, the food places. There's a long list of companies that have been affected. So the kind of behavior that they would engage in, what is actually happening, and how do we call that uncompetitive behavior? What is actually happening in a very practical example?
Okay, thank you. So basically the practical example is, if you look at what we refer to as platform competition, so that is the competition between these platforms. You just mentioned Booking.com, for instance, in the travel space, or also you can also mention Mr. D Food and UberEats in the food delivery space. So one of the findings or of the practices that the Commission found was that, so you will find in some instances some contract clauses, which we refer to as price parity clauses, which the Commission has argued or found that they actually limit price competition. So what actually happens is that you will find that if you are a small platform or a new entrant into the market who wants to enter the market and get these businesses to list on your platform, and you offer them lower fees to come into that, or lower commission fees. So these clauses that this, what you call them, the big or the nationally scaled platforms, will restrict those businesses to basically list the same product in that new entrant or smaller platform at a lower price. So basically, in essence, there are those kind of clauses that will limit price competition. You also mentioned, for instance, that you talked about the classifieds, which include, the car dealership as well as as well as the real estate agents. So we also found that these platforms that are already, leading or that are big in size, they also tend to conclude what we call the multi-year contract. And the commission argues that this multi-year contract, essentially, they tend to have the effect whereby it is the lock-in effect which locks these dealers and these estate agents to these big platforms. So if you are a small platform that want to enter this space, it becomes difficult for you because they've got this contract that incentivizes these businesses to list with the guys that are already established in the market. So these are some of the examples, even on the business user side. So the businesses that list on these platforms, what we also found is that in some of these platforms, there are discriminatory prices, or price differential. So what I mean by that is that you will find that for businesses that are listed on platform and they're selling their product through these platforms, the bigger businesses, they will be able to negotiate for a better price, whereas the smaller kind of businesses, they will get higher prices. And those differences between what the smaller and the bigger businesses are paying on this platform, it is very, very significant. And as such, it limits the ability of the smaller businesses to be able to compete against these bigger businesses that have also listed their product on platforms. So those are the findings that we have found.
Very interesting. And I mean, I have a look at Google as well, which, I mean, you don't even think about, because you sort of, as a consumer, you type in something and then all these results do come up, but you sort of don't understand the business model of Google. So, those that pay for their things to come up first, they will come up first. Those that, things that Google own as well will also come up. And the smaller, less sort of prominent businesses disappear, and you sort of have to really go down to a whole bunch of pages further down the line to try and find that. And that is also something that you have found, which needs to be fixed. In fact, what I'm reading here is that Google has been directed to provide 180 million rand in advertising credits to the smaller platforms. So that's quite a big finding as well.
Indeed. I mean, if you look at it, Google, I mean, most of the consumers' shopping journey essentially start on Google. I mean, you can think of, if you want to search for a house, you are likely to go to Google. Sometimes if you are looking for accommodation, you are likely to go to Google. And what the commission found was that actually for one to attain a higher position on Google, it is very, very important. So companies with deep marketing budget and deep resources, they tend to be able to buy that space at the top of the page. And that is where essentially most of the customer clicks comes from. So we see Google as an important, way for any platform to acquire customers. So here's the remedy. So the remedy, one part of it is to provide the small businesses with advertising credits. So this will be able to ensure that they are also able to participate, in getting those positions. But there are also issues around, because in Google as well, the issues of you being able to optimize the search on Google. So there are also issues around training for small businesses in terms of how to best utilize Google and acquire customers. So indeed, it is a very, very interesting one.
It is. And Takealot. I mean, Takealot has been one that has been spoken about for quite some time, and many people have looked at it and thought, like, hang on, some of these prices are absolutely ridiculous. And that whole supply and demand issue that they work on. I mean, I remember at one stage where it was for generators and backup batteries and all of those things, and the pricing was through the ceiling. Not to mention that whole trend, I think it was all around that prime drink, and suddenly you'd look on there and find prices that were absolutely ridiculous. So let's talk about, how do we fix this now? So I know that all of the findings are in and I mean, this provisional summary, or the online intermediation platform market inquiry, but what are the remedial actions that are now being implemented in order to stop all of this happening?
I think the remedial actions themselves, I mean, they aim to, one, it is the issue of to sort of bring about intensive competition into this online space, because you know that through competition, consumers tend to benefit through low prices, but also firms tend to be more innovative. And also it's also about this remedial action trying to bring about the issues of inclusivity. Hence, the focus in some of these instances is on the participation of small and medium enterprises, as well as on the HDPs, which is the historically disadvantaged persons. So, I mean, to give you an example, in some of these remedial actions, you will see that issues around, the contracts that I referred to as limiting price competition, or as limiting competition, is essentially those contracts, they will, the remedial action speaks to those contracts being terminated. I talked about the smaller businesses that actually list being charged higher prices compared to the big businesses. So there are also remedial actions, that aims at reducing the prices for small and medium enterprises, to ensure that the playing field is more leveled. And there are also what we refer to as HDP specific programs, which in essence the remedial action, try to ensure that there's an effective participation by HDP into this space. So they talk to businesses that want to list on these platforms, trying to reduce their onboarding fees for you to list, as you pay subscription fee, activation fees, and all of that. So they aim to reduce that, or the difference between what the small business pay and what the big business pay. But also there's also the issue of, even if the small businesses that are on the platforms, are able to onboard, the issue of giving them advertising credit to achieve visibility that can be converted into sales. So,
Yeah.
I mean, broadly speaking, I mean, it is just to ensure that there's more rigorous competition at all levels of the market, and there's an effective participation of small businesses and historically disadvantaged businesses.
So just very quickly, I mean, am I as a consumer going to see the difference? If I type something into Google, will it be different for me? Will the experience be different, and I'll get more variety and more better pricing? Because this is what it's all about. This is here to protect the consumer, and we know as a consumer we've really been taken for a ride in a lot of these instances, and perhaps we fall for it. But how are things going to change? What is the difference that I am going to see in my consumer experience online?
I think the difference, I mean, taking Google as an example, from their consumer perspective, what you are going to see is, it might be that previously you would perhaps see the larger platforms appearing on that. So indeed, you will now be able to see a variety of platform achieving prominence on Google, but there are also certain specific configurations that Google will need to basically apply, which will also ensure that small business are given prominence. But also, it talks about also the South African flag being displayed on Google. So what it essentially means is that if you want to support a proudly South African platform, because in some of these instances you compete against international platforms, so you are unable to distinguish which one is South African and not. There are going to be those identifiers for you to be able to see that now this is a South African platform. Perhaps they understand my consumer needs better. I don't know. So you can be able to choose that. But I think that the consumer experience, it is going to be that you are going to experience variety and more competition. So you are going to always find that there are other platforms that compete, and you can be able to look at their services. I mean, you talked about prices. So you will be able to know, it will be introducing more competition to these established platforms that you can consider and look at whether they are satisfying you and is much better as a consumer.
Good. And is this with immediate effect, or are these changes currently being done and implemented now? And when will we actually start seeing it?
I think that the timelines, they differ depending on the complexity of implementing the remedy itself, but issues around the contract clauses that I talked about, those are things that will be much more quicker, for the firms to basically implement. But there are those that requires technological reconfiguration, and they will take a bit of time. So the time will vary depending on the remedy.
All right, we'll leave it there. Tshegofatso, thank you very much. Tshegofatso Radinku is a senior analyst at the Competition Commission in South Africa, discussing the latest report by the Competition Commission, where the Commission says there are reasons to believe that online intermediation platforms that facilitate the buying of goods and services between businesses and customers may have colluded to hinder, distort, or restrict competition. So, yeah, hopefully that will be a better experience for all of us online. We can save a little bit of money there.